good to go. So, you know, drawing a map, it's kind of fiddly and not too interesting. So I think project 2 is a good one we can really work on and sort of have some fun with, which is basically starting with a pencil drawing or an illustration of any type of graphic that you want. And then we can kind of go through the process of using Adobe Illustrator to produce a graphic. But before we get into that, for everybody who's completely new to Illustrator, I'm just going to kind of go through the basics of, you know, what is the point of Adobe Illustrator? Why does it exist? And how does it fit in with the Creative Suite? Now, when it comes to print design, you guys are familiar, I'm sure, with Adobe Photoshop, Adobe InDesign, and Adobe Illustrator. Those are sort of the three primary Creative Suite pieces of software that you work together to produce pretty much everything in print design and publication design. So Adobe Illustrator is actually one of the oldest Adobe products. It probably predates Adobe Photoshop by a good couple of years. And it's essentially meant to be a scalable vector graphic design program. It was originally developed for people who worked in silk screening. So that was one of the primary ways back in the early to late 1980s that most of your large format graphics were produced was using silk screening. And prior to, you know, before computers were powerful enough for graphics, you would draw out your graphics and then you would use an X-Acto knife to cut out the graphic shapes for the different inks out of a kind of a vellum that was called Rubylith. So Adobe Illustrator, the pen tools and the graphic tools that you see in Adobe Illustrator were meant to digitize that process for large format graphics. So a vector graphic is meant to be scalable to any size without increasing the file size, which was really important back in the day when computers didn't have a lot of power for graphics. So you didn't have enough memory to really have a great big image file. So a vector graphic is scalable to any size without increasing the size, whereas a raster graphic, which is basically what Photoshop is all about, is not scalable because it's actually made up of pixels and dots. So the higher resolution a Photoshop file is, the bigger the file gets. Whereas Adobe Illustrator, you can take this, you know, this kind of ugly Kootenai dental graphic and you could print it out 50 feet tall and it would be sharp and look good because it can be scalable. So that's kind of the main point of Adobe Illustrator. Since then, it's obviously evolved into all kinds of things and has kind of become its own artistic style and platform. But silk screening kind of does remain one of the main applications, even for like apparel design and stuff like that. But logos, any kind of graphic you're going to see, Adobe Illustrator is your go-to piece of software. Adobe Illustrator is not to be used to do things like business card layouts or 3-panel pamphlets or anything like that. That's what Adobe InDesign is for. And similarly, if you want to do more sort of airbrush effects or raster graphics, even though Adobe Illustrator does support those things, it isn't the best tool for it. That's Adobe Photoshop. So as you get kind of more familiar with these pieces of software, you'll kind of learn how Photoshop and Illustrator and InDesign all kind of work together. But we're going to focus on, obviously, Adobe Illustrator. So just kind of fundamentally the basics about how you put graphics together in Adobe Illustrator. You know, you've got your main kind of toolbar. A lot of these tools are, you don't use them a ton. You know, your fundamental shapes, you might use those. We'll kind of get into using them, but your most important tool is the pen tool. And if you click and hold on the pen tool here, you kind of see that there's a couple of sub options, adding and removing anchor points and stuff. But your main one is the pen tool, and that's for drawing what are called Bezier curves. And we'll get a little bit of practice in this first project working with Bezier curves. And then these are just called your basics or your primaries, rectangles, circles, stars, whatever. You can kind of use those. And everything else we don't need to worry about too much. This is the Artboard tool, and what we're looking at here is an artboard. You can have multiple artboards in one Adobe Illustrator file, and we'll get into where that's useful in future projects. But for now, we're just going to start with one basic artboard. Probably one of the most fundamental things about Adobe Illustrator that I think fairly frequently gets ignored even by fairly experienced designers in Adobe Illustrator is that the default color palette, swatch palette, you know, these color swatches here, most of them are not that useful, but what's a little bit more confusing is that they're not actually even really set up right. One of the kind of fundamental things in Adobe Illustrator and really print design in general is the use of spot color swatches versus process color swatches. So we're going to get into that in a little bit more detail once we actually start making some graphics, and I'm kind of going to go through the reasons why you would always use a spot color graphic versus a process color swatch whenever you're defining colors in your Adobe Illustrator work. So we'll kind of get into that today, and then we'll talk a little bit about color systems. You guys are probably familiar with Pantone, the Pantone color system. You probably heard that. So Pantone color swatches are a way of standardizing colors so that if you send your file out to a print shop where you can't be present and they don't have anything except your digital file, they have something to match their ink mix against to make sure they're getting an accurate color mix. What's also kind of frustrating about the Adobe Creative Suite in general is that the built-in Pantone color palette swatch libraries that you can load, they're all wrong. They don't define the ink mixes correctly. So it is a huge point of frustration for a lot of designers. They think they're using the Pantone color, they load up the color swatch from Adobe, they use the Pantone swatch library, and then they get a different color in print. So it is something that we're going to go through a little bit, is just how to define your Pantone colors correctly. It's not going to be a big deal. I'm not going to spend hardly any time on it in introduction, but I think it's just a really fundamental thing that everybody should understand when they start working with Illustrator. And if you get in the habit of it, you're going to be well served into the Illustrator 2, which is a more advanced version of this class. Okay, so I'm going to just close down these files. I've got a couple of stuff from just my day-to-day work. I should also mention Adobe Illustrator is really good for web design, layout, and web graphics. Adobe Photoshop is used a lot by web designers, but Adobe Illustrator over the past, I'd say 5 to 6 years, is what Adobe's kind of pushing web designers to use to produce their layouts and their graphics for websites. And Illustrator is pretty good for it. Years ago there used to be software called Fireworks, which was made by a company called Macromedia, which Adobe purchased, and then they've been slowly killing off Adobe Fireworks, even though Fireworks was a more built-to-purpose, better web development tool, but you can't use it anymore. So Illustrator is the go-to tool, and when I do my web layout work, when I'm working with my programmers and stuff on websites, I do my mock-ups in Adobe Illustrator as well. So it's a pretty good web development tool. And for a lot of times you can use it for web graphics component production too. I'm just going to save this here because I do want that saved. So I'm just going to close everything down. I'm just going to start from scratch with a new project. Okay. Before I do that, I'm going to just quickly switch over to Google Drive. Oh, I think I got somebody's email here. Just going to add these two people to the share so that you can access it. I'm also assuming that everybody's familiar with how to use Google Drive. If you're not, please feel free to speak up and let me know, and I'll answer any question you have about how to use Google Drive. But I mean, it's pretty straightforward, so I'm not going to get into that too much unless somebody really has issues with it. Okay, so as you can see, I've put together the folders here just within each project. What you guys can do is just go in and create your own project folder, just with your name so that I know what your work is. Just like this. Now I'm making my folder shared so that you guys can edit it. So if I save any files to here, you can download it, copy it, work with my files, that's fine. If you don't want other people to have access to your folder, just make sure that when you create your folder, don't inherit the sharing settings, just share it with me only so that I can access your handed in project files. But Google Drive is where I'd like you guys to upload your finished work. And I just find it's a much easier place to do that versus the My Campus thing, which is really clunky and super slow, and you can't use commenting and all that kind of stuff. Google Drive is just a vastly better platform. Similarly, I kind of think Google Meet is considerably better than Microsoft Teams, which is why I'm not even using Microsoft Teams. So as you can tell, I kind of use Google tools for my day-to-day work, and I think that they are just easier to work all around with. So that's why we're going to be using them. Okay, so back over to the project, getting started in Adobe Illustrator. So when you create a new Illustrator file, you're presented with this kind of new document defaults. Okay, and you can, you could pick one of these. These are pretty straightforward. But I'm just going to go through very briefly what we're doing on the right-hand side here when we develop a new Adobe Illustrator file. So the width, obviously, and the height, that's just how big the piece of paper is, or the artboard, the first artboard. And you can say, I want 3 or 4 pages or artboards in my file, but by default, just 1. I kind of typically like to give myself 3 for various reasons. Bleed, this is the area outside of the trim size of that sheet. So if you want to import this into Adobe InDesign, the bleed area is recognized as the alignment point, and that's just for when you send a file off to print. If it goes over the edge of the paper, that's where the marks go down so that they can cut the paper and have a nice finished print over the edge type of a look. Color mode, CMYK color by default, that's probably what you want to do. It doesn't really change anything. RGB is just for web graphics. CMYK is for print. You can switch back and forth between the color modes, so it's not really a concern. Raster effects, this is for anything that like drop shadows or blurs or anything like that you can apply in Adobe Illustrator. That just tells the file type what resolution to target when it scales up or down to different sizes. So 300 pixels per inch or dots per inch is kind of the standard for print, but you can get away with less if you want. This mainly impacts the performance of Illustrator when it's rendering it for you. So if you're on a slower machine that has a little less memory, you can go ahead and pop it down to 72 pixels per inch if you want. It'll just be slightly lower quality for any of those raster effects that you apply. I just leave it on 300 pixels per inch by default. Your preview mode default, you kind of always want that unless you're doing web graphics, in which you might turn preview to pixel, but leave it at default. And then your more settings, if you really want to get into it, this just gives you a little more breakdown in terms of like how the ordering of the artboards go, but I wouldn't worry too much about that right now. So pretty much when you hit the print button, aside from the artboards, everything else you can just leave just how this is and you're good to go. Okay, create. So there's my 3 artboards ready to go. So the first thing I do with every Adobe Illustrator file I ever create is I go over here to my color swatches. It's kind of my default panel that I have open. I've got a whole bunch of them open as well, but I'll get into those later. But color swatches are your first thing. And you go select all unused and delete them because I don't want to use those colors. White and black, this white means paper, but it can mean white ink, and black is a spot color. And for some reason, it always leaves you this grays folder. I just delete that too. That just makes it nice and easy to know what colors you're actually using in your document. And there's all kinds of reasons we'll get into down the road as to why you don't want a whole mess of useless color swatches in your palette. But that's the first thing I do, is I delete the default color palette. It's never useful. And then I just save my work. So I'm going to save this locally. So another little thing I get into in all of my classes for everybody is managing your file versions and organizing your kind of file structure a little bit. I'm actually going to say assignment 2. So my idea for this is we have a couple of pugs, and my family said it would be funny if I did a logo of the 2 pugs because I'm always posting pictures. So I'm going to use this project to do a kind of a cartoon style drawing of 2 pugs, and then I'm going to bring it into Adobe Illustrator and go through the process of turning it into a graphic. You guys can draw whatever you want, but that's how I like to work on the courses. Is I like to work along right with you guys on the exact project that you're doing, and I kind of just go through how I would approach it. So that's what I'm going to do. So I save my work just to get started. So you'll notice that I called it draft. I like to keep track of my revisions in my files because, you know, as you go, you're working, you might say, well, I'm not sure I like that idea or whatever, and you don't want to rely purely on the undo system. As well, if you're doing client work, revisions to your graphics are going to be a common thing. They're going to ask you for changes or whatever. So I put Rev 1, Rev 2, Rev 3. I never call a file final because files are never actually final. You'll learn as you work with clients that final is really just up to them, and you can end up with files that are called final 50 times over. You don't want to do that. So I just keep track of revisions by just adding Rev 1, 2, and 3, whatever the highest number is. That's my latest version of it. And that'll save you a lot of time just working through your projects, no matter how you name your files, but you should do that with your work as you go through this project. So I've just kind of blasted through the tool sets really quickly. Give everybody a chance to ask any questions if there's anything that you want me to go over again if I went through.
Last night, even after a violent insurrection at the U.S. Capitol attempted to overthrow American democracy, a majority of Republicans in the House and a handful of GOP senators tried to throw out the results of the presidential election, and now the right-wing media is already trying to blame the left for the sedition they sowed. For more on this, it's time for a closer look.
You can start drawing over top of your drawing. So I'm just gonna unpause my recording. All right, so back to Adobe Illustrator. So I've got my artboard set up here, and I'm ready to place a linked raster graphic. So this would be like a JPEG, and you can import or place photos in Adobe Illustrator. So this is where I'm going to bring up the next palette that's also pretty useful, which is Layers. And I have my Artboards palette attached to my Layers palette just because I tend to work those together. So each artboard that you see in the Artboards window palette, which if you want to see it is under Window, Artboards. Okay, so you can actually name these. And I like to name them just sort of like draft pug faces maybe. And then I might keep versions of them over here. I'll just name them as you want. You can actually move these around. You can rescale them. You can just kind of work with them. It's a handy way to kind of have different versions of a graphic that you're working on all in one file. When you save your Adobe Illustrator file and then you go and import it into something like Adobe InDesign, you can then say show import options and then pick which artboard to import. So you don't have to keep a bunch of different versions in a bunch of different Illustrator files. You can keep them all in one Illustrator file. So that's one of the main uses for artboards. You can also use it to export to JPEG and all kinds of stuff, but we'll get into that. But artboards and layers, those kind of are the next two most useful things. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with the concept of layers and layering in graphics software. It pretty much applies to everything in Adobe Creative Suite. So, am I sharing my screen? I should make sure that I am. Yeah, I am presenting. Okay, good. If I happen to forget to present my screen, please be sure to tell me because I can sometimes do that for sure. So my first layer, I'm just going to call this my trace layer. And this is the layer that I'm going to place my placed JPEG file on. Let's call it trace. Sorry. Something like reference image just to make it a little more clear. And then I'm going to make a new layer called dogs. Call it whatever I want, doesn't really matter. Get this stroke out of the way. Okay, so hit save again. So then you go to your local drive. I'm just going to go over to my VCAD project folder here. So I've kind of got I've got some reference photos that I've just went upstairs quickly and snapped, and then just did a few rough sketches. So I've kind of got my sketch here that I'm sort of happy with. So I'm just going to drag and drop this JPEG right into you can just drag it right into Illustrator. So the first thing you're going to notice is it's huge, right? So that's because Illustrator is taking that pixels per inch, that 300 pixels per inch, and scaling it as if this was a 72 dot per inch image, because that's what most pictures that you'll take with your average kind of smartphone will default to, is 72 dots per inch. So Illustrator is paying attention to that dots per inch to scale this. So really the 300 DPI version is about 1/3, but I can just scale that down to whatever makes sense. I mean, the resolution is not important here. I'm just using it as a reference. And when I'm doing something that's sort of based on life, sometimes I'll also place a couple of photo references just because I kind of have something that I want to sort of look at. So I'm just gonna, this was the one that I was sort of trying to capture in one of them.
I like your puffer doggos.
Yeah, they're pretty hilarious. They're actually siblings. They're from the same parents. They're just a year different, 2 different litters. But yeah, we have fun with them, and everybody's like, "Oh, you should make a logo or graphic." So might as well use this course as an excuse to do that. So that's how you can place things. So when you see an X through your graphics like this, that means it's a linked file. You can also embed images right into your Adobe Illustrator file. And what that means is that the raster graphic becomes actually part of the AI file versus a link to it. That will mean that all of the image data will contribute to the file size. So linked graphics are fine on your local drive, but you got to remember, if you upload this Adobe Illustrator file and you've just linked your graphics without packaging up the Illustrator file first, you know, if I go and download that Illustrator file, this linked image would just be an empty box, because, you know, Illustrator doesn't know where to find that linked JPEG image once I download the AI file. But, you know, I wouldn't worry too much about that for this particular project. We're just using it for our own reference. All I really care about is the vector artwork that we're going to draw over top of that. So I kind of put that, excuse me, off my artboard, just in case I want to kind of look at it. But, you know, I'm doing caricatures here, so really kind of just breaking it down into like a really simple, kind of almost cartoony kind of little drawing. But I want to give them both their own sort of personality a little bit. So just really having some fun there. So I'm going to kind of zoom in just by holding down Control and then hitting the plus key. That's your zoom in and out shortcut. Or you can use this, the magnifying tool. Okay, so if you click and right, drag, and scroll, you know, push up or down, it zooms in or out. And then if you hold down the Alt key, or the, I think it's the Command key on a Mac, it switches it to zoom out, and you can just kind of dynamically scroll in and out. So that's zooming in and out, but I tend to use the Control plus minus to manage my zoom level. Another shortcut is the space bar. So if you've got your main selection tool, the arrow, this black arrow here, you hold down your space bar, it puts a hand grabber, and that allows you to drag your view around. So that's what I'm doing when you see that. My shortcut is hold down the space bar, click and drag. Just get comfortable with your zooming in and out and your dragging tools. You're going to use those a lot in Adobe Illustrator. As well, you'll notice that I popped on my rulers. That's just Control R. That's the shortcut. Or you can go View. Okay, Show Rulers. So rulers show. Change to global rulers. I'm not going to worry about getting into that right now. Just I kind of like to be able to see my rulers, just so I can keep an eye on how big a graphic's going to be. As well, in the view mode, depends on your default settings, but you know, snap to grid, snap to pixel, and snap to point. You know, I use snap to pixel a lot because when I'm doing web graphics, you kind of want everything to be on an even pixel for exporting. But for just drawing freehand graphics like this, these snap to point and snap to pixel can kind of be annoying. So I tend to turn those off when I'm doing this type of work. So you might want to just check your snapping, because that can impact the way that your tool works when you're drawing, and can sort of feel a little restrictive, and you'll kind of get frustrated why it won't let you put your point down exactly where you want if you've got your view snapping turned on. There's lots of good places for that, but this type of artwork, you don't want that, so you turn that off. I tend to leave smart guides on. Smart guides, Control U is a shortcut. That just basically tells you, like when I hover over this, it says, you know, that's the edge, and it highlights the graphic. Without smart guides, it won't do that. You won't get any of that kind of feedback that you've got something ready to select. So smart guides can be kind of useful just as you get more, as you start to build stuff up on your graphics. You'll kind of want to be able to see what you're highlighting. So the first thing you can kind of see here is I made my layers first, but I had my dogs layer selected, so my placed images ended up on that layer. I don't want them there. So you can move stuff around in your layers palette by first selecting whatever object. Okay, so when I talk about an object, you can expand your layer, and then you can see all the stuff that's on the layer. Okay, so linked file, linked file, linked file. This little red dot here indicates which one I currently have selected with my selection tool. So if I want to move that down to this layer, you can just click and drag on that, and it just pops it down there. As well, if I want to put these reference photos down on that layer, I can hold Shift with my selection tool active, hold Shift, click, and that selects both of them. And you can see again in your layers palette, this red indicator tells you what you've got selected. So
Sorry, quick question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there a reason, like, is there, I guess a reason to maybe choose linking file as opposed to dragging and dropping a photo into Illustrator?
They both do the same thing. If you drag and drop, the default is to link it. That's the default way with Adobe Illustrator. So to embed a file, you basically can select the image and say embed file, or you can crop the image and that will embed it. So I'll just do a quick example of that. I wouldn't worry about it too much, but in this case, I might go Object, Crop Image. Okay, so cropping a linked file embeds a copy of the original. The original file at the linked location is not affected. So Illustrator will tell you what it's doing when you're working with placed raster graphics. So you say, okay, and then let's say I just wanted to crop down to this face here, little pug face. So hit enter. Okay, so now this raster image is now an element that is actually part of the Adobe Illustrator file, and it will change the file size a fair bit just because adding raster data to the image. But you know, so JPEG might increase it by like what, I don't know, 50 kilobytes. You know, we're not talking a big deal. But now this is part of the Illustrator file. I don't have to worry about it. This one is still linked, and that's what that X indicates. You'll also notice that the color of that X changed when I moved it to the layer, because that's just the layer preference. So you can choose the guide color for any layer. And you sometimes will change this depending on the color of the graphic that you're working with or what have you. But that's what that means. So when I create this first layer, it's just using light blue. And my dogs layer is using light red, and that's fine. So the next thing that we want to be doing once we kind of got our placed images for reference, what I'm gonna do is I'm actually going to make a copy of this link, because I'm going to draw one dog's face on one artboard, and I'm going to draw another dog's face on the other artboard, and I kind of want them separate as two separate graphics. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key as a shortcut. So with my selection tool still, Alt, that is now, you can see it kind of adds a little double white arrow there. That's a shortcut for duplicating something. You can also Control C, you know, cut and paste, but just a shortcut for duplicating an object or a shape on your artboard is holding down Alt with the pointer, click and drag, and it duplicates it. So that's now two instances of my placed image. Now I want to crop this, so I'm just going to kind of straighten it out a little. By clicking on one of the handles. So these things here are called anchors or handles. And if you see the different arrows, like if it's selected just outside of it, That's shortcutting for rotating. Okay, but if I hover my pointer over it, now it's distorting and scaling it. And a lot of times this actually behaves a little differently than Photoshop. If you're used to Photoshop, the default when you resize a smart object or a layer object in Photoshop, if you don't hold down shift or anything, it constrains automatically. But in Illustrator, if you don't hold down shift, it distorts it, which I don't want. So if you want to scale something, you hold down shift and that defaults it to constrain, and then it just scales it without distorting it. So now I've kind of got this placed JPEG feeling pretty good. I don't want to crop it. So again, object, crop image. I mean, I leave this on, typically don't show again because this is kind of annoying, but I leave it on so that when I'm teaching Illustrator, you can see it. But typically I would click don't show that again. So I'm just going to crop it down for reference, just so I'm not distracted from my other rough stuff outside of my sketch. Okay, same thing for this one now, but that's looking kind of the orientation I sort of want. I mean, I'm going to rotate these around, scale them afterwards anyway, so I'm not too worried about that. So just crop the image again. By kind of clicking and dragging those marquee tools, you can do corners. I mean, I'm pretty sure you guys are familiar with marquee tools in various bits of software. Okay, so kind of happy with my two reference images there. So now that I've got those placed, I'm going to lock this layer. So just like any other Adobe suite, when in a layer you can control whether or not a layer is visible with this little eye icon. Click that off and on to toggle visibility, or locking, right? So if you lock something, you can't accidentally select it. So when you're tracing over top of your graphic, you know, locking your reference image is desirable, because then you're not accidentally selecting it, and it just kind of makes it easy to work with. And I mean, I should mention that if you didn't want to do a sketch, you just wanted to go straight from a photo, you could do that too. You know, you could work on doing this drawing. You know, the style that I'm going to go for is I kind of want it to have, you know, like a Disney black and white outline type of drawing so that I can fill in colors underneath it. So what I'm going to work on next is just drawing the single color, the black and white kind of drawing, cartoon style, coloring book style kind of graphic. So my first go-to tool for this type of stuff is the Bezier pen tool. Now, if you'll notice when I select that, it's got this little, you know, cross out because I currently have my locked layer selected. So I'm just going to go up to my layer that I'm going to draw on. So for anybody who's never opened Adobe Illustrator before and, you know, just wants to get kind of familiar with the various drawing tools, you've got your pen tool here, which is the main go-to tool that I use all the time. It's the only one that I sort of feel confident with, honestly. But, you know, I've seen that people do some nice work with the curve tool or even the freehand brush tool. They all produce different types of graphics. Now, I find this freehand brush tool really hard to work with. A lot of people do nice work with this with a tablet. I'm just not good with it. So that's just my personal preference. But you can kind of use any of these drawing tools. But the thing that I mainly want to introduce you guys to is the idea of lines and strokes and how they work as vector graphics. So this is the preview mode. Now the other thing that Adobe Illustrator has is outline mode, okay? So the shortcut for outline mode is Control-Y. So in outline mode, what this is showing is it's showing the line, and each of these little anchor points or a node is one little point on an editable path. So it's one of the really powerful things about Adobe Illustrator is you can kind of fine-tune your graphics and your shapes afterwards. But when you see a whole bunch of anchors like this, that's quite hard to work with. The point of the pen tool is to make as few points as possible and still get the shape. And it actually makes a much smoother and more regular curve. So what I'm doing is I'm clicking and adding an anchor, and then I'm extending by holding down, clicking, and I'm extending out these what are called handles, okay? So now if I go back with this direct selection tool, okay, so the selection tool selects the entire path. Every node on the path is active and selected. So when I click and drag with my selection tool, clicking and dragging the whole object. When I use direct selection, okay, by default, if I do that, it's still moving everything, but it behaves differently once I select an individual anchor, okay? So with the direct selection tool, I can then move this node, this point here, so I can keep the basic relative rules, so I get a nice controlled even curve between each of my handles, or each of my nodes or anchors. There. I can also change the pitch of that curve by clicking and dragging or moving, you know, the handles related to it. So Bezier tools take a little bit of practice. It's sort of like imagining everything as a drawing pictures out of rubber bands almost. But once you get comfortable with your pen tool, you realize how nice this is as a way to kind of refine your shapes and stuff as you get into doing custom drawings. So, you know, I'm going to go out of outline mode. I'm just showing you outline mode just so you can kind of see what's going on behind the scenes. But, you know, you can see when I use the paintbrush tool, you know, I got a okay looking shape. It's kind of shaky and wobbly because, you know, my hands shake here. I'm not really good at drawing with a mouse. I can still go in and edit those nodes, but because there's so many of them, I guess I should get in the habit of calling them anchors, because that's what Illustrator calls them. I'm just used to nodes because of 3D software. But you can still work with each of the handles and stuff, but you've just got so many of them, it becomes a very, you know, much harder to smooth this out. I can't really work with that because there's just so many nodes there. So that's why I don't particularly like the paintbrush tool. It might have its places. I literally never use it. And, you know, I've been doing professional Illustrator illustrations for a long time, and I've just never found a good place for that tool. But some people do a good job with it. So if you want to, go ahead. But I would recommend that you try and get comfortable with the pen tool. Similarly, the curvature tool, it's like a different version of the tool, but it, you know, I encourage just playing around with it, but it just draws Bezier curves in a different way. It doesn't have handles, so it just by default creates curves that you can kind of see a little more in real time, so it sort of previews the curve. So some people are a little more comfortable with that. And again, like I say, I think just if you're really new to it, try them both, see which feels best to you, and you can use either one. There's no right or wrong with that. It's just it creates a different, it's creating the exact same thing, it's just doing it in a different way. So you can do that as well, and it does a nice job, and you can edit each of your handles and anchors the same way. I just don't personally use that one because I just don't like the way it does it as much. I'm much more used to the basic pen tool. So that's the one that I'm going to use, but you absolutely don't have to. If you remember at the beginning as well, I showed you if you click and hold, you get the contextual menu for the pen tool. If there's a little arrow next to an icon, that means there's a contextual options on that tool. Okay, so adding and deleting anchor points. So this is something that you do pretty regularly. Say you're like, I don't like this curve, I want this to go straight through there. If you select the delete anchor point tool, it's just going to draw a fresh curve right between whatever is left. So as you go through and simplify your shape, it just changes it, just gets rid of all those handles in there. So that can often be pretty useful once you get into a more complex graphic. So those would be the three tools I say work with. There's also, I think the width tool here. No, that's not. It's not for path drawing. So just focus on if you're just really fresh to it and you just want to start, you know, I'm going to be using this tool. You could use this one, and if you want to, go with that one too. But I warn you, you might be a little frustrated with it. So, okay, so I'm going to go back to preview mode and get out of my outline mode so you can see my strokes and lines. So I'm going to bring up another palette here. I'm going to just get rid of my layers, just move them over to my other monitor, and then this is my stroke palette, okay? So a very basic stroke, that's, you know, that's a line. And it's the outline of your shape in Adobe Illustrator. Over here in the palette, we've got the fill selection and the stroke. Okay, so you can go back and forth between stroke and fill. So the stroke, you can click it to bring it forward, and all of these properties here are what apply to this. So the weight, that is the thickness of it, okay? So the default is 1 point, but you can click it up to see how it gets thicker. So you know this path is in the middle of the stroke. These elements here control how the stroke is applied to your shape. So you can say, put on the inside of your path, or the outside of your path, or the middle of your path. The default is the middle, but it, you know, there's different places where you might want that. There's also this
Hi,
profile.
Tobias.
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry.
Yeah.
How do you bring that up? Like right now,
Okay.
it's only giving me the color. Like I can't see
Yeah.
the
So go to
box that you
Window.
have.
Okay. So
Okay.
just go to Window,
Mhm.
Stroke. And if you're into using shortcuts, which I could never remember these, but Control F10, it'll always tell you what the related, well, it won't always. Most of the time it'll tell you, Illustrator will tell you what the shortcut is. There are some
Right.
more advanced things that Illustrator quite nastily does not tell you the shortcut for. But anyways, almost every palette that you ever work with is in this window.
Sweet. Thanks.
Okay, so that's where you bring up your stroke. So there's also a profile. So this alters the way that a stroke is applied to a shape, and you can kind of play around with those. You know, this thick to thin kind of makes it real thin down here, so it gives it a little bit more of like a brush great variation in thickness. So there's probably a time and a place for using that for sure. You know, another width profile. It's kind of a variable width profile, so you can just kind of play around with these, see how they impact your shapes and your graphics. You know, that profile just has a hard beginning. I don't really know why I'd ever use that, but there's places for all these things. It really depends on what you're doing. So playing around with the profiles can be kind of a interesting way to just alter your stroke a little bit. So when you're working with your pen tool, you know, defaults format, what I've got here is this is what's called a closed shape. So that means it's a continuous shape that is closed. This is an open shape or a line. It is not closed. So that means that it's kind of got an end and a start. So that's where something like, if I did a variable stroke here and make it thicker, so it's going to taper it from the middle to the end. As well, when we get into just applying a fill, a closed shape will fill everything within the closed shape. An open shape, if I apply a fill to it, is just going to basically draw a straight line on that fill between the two endpoints. So most of the time, unclosed shapes are not desirable in Adobe Illustrator because you can't control that straight line. That's not what you want. So almost everything that you're doing in Adobe Illustrator, most of the time, there are definitely cases for just a line, for sure, but that's typically because you're only going to be working with the stroke. But you can, you know, when you apply a fill to it, you're going to get that type of result. So most of the time you want to sort of be working with closed shapes so that you can apply your fills and your strokes, and we'll get into those different things down the road. So that's kind of the very basics of working with the Bezier tools, the various pen drawing tools, and open and closed shapes. So in my layers palette, just bringing my layers palette back onto the screen, you can see how that, oops, I probably shouldn't have deleted this. Okay, so Illustrator just calls these things paths. Whether they're open or closed, it's just a path. And you can, if you want to name a shape, like say it's kind of an object in here, we'll get into this in other projects, but naming your shapes can be a handy way to kind of know what's on your layer, but you don't need to. But as you get more complex, you'll start to realize how stuff really stacks up in here. And if you want to kind of go in and narrow down on one thing, it can be sort of a pain to have to surf through this long stack of graphics, but it doesn't look too bad right now, but you'll see how quickly it kind of stacks up as we get going. Okay, so I'm ready to start drawing. Right out of the bat, I did reference why we delete swatches and stuff like this. So I'm just going to very quickly dive into what a spot color is and how they behave a little bit differently. It is a really good idea to at least start with a few basic colors and swatches before you start drawing anything. So if you go and double click on a color, now I'm going to show basically why this doesn't work and sort of show the difference. So black is a process color, and it's kind of a reserved name because it's part of the CMYK model. So if I wanted to go and click here, process color, which is the default in Adobe Illustrator, and click spot, it's saying the name cannot be used for a spot because it's reserved for process plates. Please choose another name. Okay, not going to worry about that. Now white, I can turn into a spot color, I believe. Yeah, because white isn't technically an ink, right? It is in silkscreening. You very regularly put down white ink when you're printing on a t-shirt. But when you're printing on paper, you rarely put down white ink because the white is the paper. So that's why Illustrator lets you turn the default white into a spot swatch, but it won't let you with black. But you kind of say, well, I would like black to be a spot color, and there'll be a reason for that you'll see down the road. So all you really do is you just create a new swatch. And when you name a color, you can adjust the value. So when you're printing on like your inkjet printer or continuous tone, like color copier type printer that they have on campus, if you've ever printed out from Adobe Illustrator, you'll note that it kind of looks sort of gray. If you just use the default black, it doesn't really look that black. And that's because it's not mixed with any of the other four colors. It's pretty common in 4-color printing to actually mix in a percentage of the other colors. And this can sort of tint how warm or cool or yellow or red. But by default, you might create something that's called like a rich black, which might be 25% of the other colors. So I typically just call that rich black, although you can just leave the default values if you want, doesn't matter. But what I'm doing is I'm saying spot color. By default, spot colors are always global. So what global means is that when you create a spot color swatch, everywhere that you link to this Adobe Illustrator file, this exact ink match is available. So if you bring this into Photoshop or you link it to an Adobe InDesign file, this color will be available in those programs as well. And that is the main reason why you always want to use a spot color when you're building Adobe Illustrator graphics, is just for that kind of portability of all your colors. If you just make swatches and leave them at the default process color, you can still work with them, but they're not going to be global. And they're not going to, even though you can check it off, they're still not going to behave the way a spot color does, because they're just not going to get imported into the other programs. But if you say spot color, it will. So I would just say every time you're creating a swatch for anything, just make it a spot color by default. It's always a better way to go. It's also easier for building your gradients and all kinds of different things. It's weird. Illustrator is clearly designed around spot colors, and yet it doesn't default to spot colors, which I don't know why that is, but it should, but it doesn't.
So a spot color is just something you can use with every program?
Well, it's like spot colors, how they really work in the print world. A spot color is actually a custom mixed ink according to the Pantone formula for that particular color. So the reason you use spot colors is like when you see like a really vibrant pink or a really blaze orange or something, or even just a bright orange or really bright greens. There's colors that you guys might be familiar with what's called a color gamut. So there's a range of colors that can be reproduced using the CMYK process printing. Or CMYK separation, but there's a whole bunch of colors that the human eye can see that are not reproducible by CMYK. So that's what spot colors are for, is to give designers a much broader color palette to work with. But you've got to custom mix those inks. You can't reproduce them with a CMYK process. So that is why Pantone spot colors exist. Is mixing dots of cyan, magenta, and yellow and black. You're actually putting down a custom mixed ink according to a preset formula that print shops can use. But that is how spot colors are primarily used in print. But they have another purpose in Adobe Illustrator, which is just much easier to work with them in the various tools that you use to kind of build your graphics. When you go to print, say you do go to print with something, you can always just say convert all spots to process. And as long as you've kind of developed colors using the Pantone color bridge system, you're going to get pretty reliable results. The thing that you'll notice as you start to get into doing more professional graphics and stuff is that what you see on your screen with a color is generally looks way more vibrant than what you see when you hit print. And that's just because RGB, the RGB gamut on your computer screen is way broader than what CMYK is. There's just a lot more colors that can be reproduced through RGB. It's about 16.8 if you're using 16.8 million colors if you're using a standard monitor display. And if you're using an HDR, that expands the range up to about 18.5 million. And I think last time I kind of really dove into this, I think on average, most people can determine about 20 million different shades of colors on average. But of course, there's people who are kind of colorblind who can't, and then there's people who are called tetrachromats who can apparently see way more colors than other people. So it's very much about your color perception and even your calibration of your monitor, right? If you're on a non-studio, just kind of out of the box, Apple Mac is going to display colors within a certain range, and a Windows machine is not going to take those exact same colors and render them the same way. So you're just getting an approximation of your colors on your screen. So that is why you want to, as you start to get more concerned about specific colors in design, you kind of want to really get comfortable with the use of spot colors, understanding how the Pantone system ties into it. We don't need to dive into it for this class. We're just going to make spot colors. That's it. You can call them whatever you want. You can mix the inks however you want. Doesn't really matter. Just be aware that you don't have the vibrancy when you finally hit print. So
That does help.
Yeah, we'll cover that in almost every project. Spot colors are fundamental to Adobe Illustrator, so I introduce them right away. As we go through the projects, you'll get more comfortable with them. But don't worry about it too much right now. If you're fresh to it, you just want to kind of get in and start drawing with something, and that's what I've done. Is I've just made myself a rich black because I'm going to do these little doggo pictures in rich black. Okay, so I mean, I'm going to just sort of dive in now and start using my pen tool to go at this with a technique that I use. Now, you do not have to use this technique. You can make your graphics however you like, but this is how I like to do it. So when I look at a pencil drawing, one of the things that I sort of notice is that just by the very nature of how a pencil works, or whether you're using ink or whatever, you really have lines that vary in thickness. You know, there's thin little sketchy construction lines that I've done, and then kind of heavier, thicker ones where I've darkened things in. I mean, I don't want my final graphic to look sketchy like this. I want it to look kind of clean and crisp, you know, kind of like a Disney color, you know, whatever, coloring book graphic. So that's what a vector graphic is going to do, is make this into something that's kind of scalable and super sharp and crisp. But I can still kind of keep the overall kind of character of this drawing by kind of coming at this with a little bit of a different way of looking at it. You know, the default way that I see a lot of people, they start drawing, is what they do is they just start thinking of it as just a line. They're like, okay, well, I'm going to trace this ear, and that ear maybe goes like this. Oh, but now I don't want to cover that, so I guess what I'll do is I'll get rid of the thing, and okay, there you go, that's a line. All right, that's not too bad. Maybe I'll apply a non-uniform stroke to it. You know, and that looks okay. If I hide that my reference layer just so you can see it, it's coming along, right? But thing is, I don't really have a ton of control over the thin and the, you know, how this tapers off or whatever. So what I do with these sorts of graphics is I look at them more as the outline. So just like as if this was a solid shape, and then each of these interior spaces are also negative space shapes, so that, you know, we can kind of end up with a complete closed graphic that doesn't have any open strokes, which then I can apply different fills to and all the rest of it. So that's sort of why I'm approaching the drawing this way. Again, because the whole purpose of this exercise is just to gain some comfort with your graphics tools, feel free to kind of work with them however you like. You do not have to use the process that I'm using here. You know, and I'm pretty comfortable with the Bezier tools, so the clicking and dragging, so I can kind of zip through it pretty quickly. That just comes with practice. So these projects are great for just getting comfortable with the tools, zooming in and out, scrubbing around, that type of stuff. I do that pretty regularly. But I kind of zoom it up like that and kind of get going. So just with that in mind, that's what I'm going to do, is I'm just going to do the full silhouette of this shape. Okay, so I start here, just wherever arbitrarily. So what I'm doing when I click and drag to make a handle is I hold the mouse button, and then I drag out, and that pulls out the handles. I then continue on to my next node, right? So most of the time, most of the nodes, unless I want it to be a sharp corner, I'm going to click and drag every time. If I want a sharp corner, I click and don't drag, and then the next one I can then click and drag off that corner, or I can go like this to make a sharp corner. But because of the very nature of this graphic, it doesn't really have any sharp corners, so I want every node that I put down, every anchor, to have a handle. So I'm just going to do Control Z to undo that, click and drag. It's not super easy to go in and add a handle back to a unhandled node, so you'd want to kind of get comfortable with clicking and dragging to draw out your handles. I can always go back and add more nodes afterwards. Now, what will happen is you'll get to a point and you're like, oh, I can't quite get this to work. So if you want to close off one end of the handle, you can just click on the anchor before you do your next one. It leaves just half the handle. That allows you to start a new curve off of that curve. So when you come to a sharp point like that, the clicking and dragging, that just closes off the one handle, so you can start a new point. Okay. So that just takes, I think the best way to do that is just to practice with it. So I'm going to Control plus to zoom in a little closer, because you know I can see how I sort of scribbled a little bit of fuzz here, but I actually want to keep that. So I'm gonna like to be able to go and take a look a little closer. Okay, so that's just a quick click, drag, click again on that handle to close the handle. That's what I'm doing there. So with practice, it just becomes pretty intuitive. You don't really need to think about it too much. But at first, it does take some getting used to, absolutely. So don't feel too bad if you're just really want to just get comfortable with how the Bezier drawing tool works. So that's all I'm doing, is I'm just going through and kind of creating this path, following my drawing roughly the way I think it would be translated into this sort of a shape. So I'm just going to zip through it here quickly now that I've sort of demonstrated the tool. There's actually, I think there's a web app that it's kind of designed to help you practice Bezier tool drawing. You got to get it, you got to make a path in as few paths as possible. I mean, really, it's not that big of a deal. I've seen very, very complex illustrations done in Adobe Illustrator, you know, 20,000, 50,000 nodes. When you start to get into that number of nodes, it can actually really start to be a memory hog. But it's just kind of a non-issue with your average studio computer these days. Illustrator's pretty efficient now. Okay, so I've closed that shape. So if I go back to outline mode, Control Y, now you can sort of see, you know, that's my silhouette shape of the drawing. Control Y again to go back. If I just swap my fill and my stroke there, shape kind of looks like that. But I want to be able to see my drawing still, so I'm gonna swip that back. Speaking of pugs, one of them just bastarded its way through my studio door and is now in here. Come on, Pug, you gotta go out. Sorry guys, 1 second. Where'd you go? Where'd you go? Okay, so to get back into it, so now we're kind of talking about that line variation. So I'm looking at this ear here, for example, as a bit of a negative space. So I'm going to do the exact same thing, but I'm going to draw on the inside of the line now. And that's where I can sort of choose to maybe copy some of my errant little sketches that are kind of happy accidents. I might not like that later, but I'm going to keep it for now. And other times I might choose to not follow my line, like here. So this is where it's just kind of free-form graphics. However, I think looks good. Oops. And what you'll find sometimes too, depending, especially on a smaller screen, that's why I don't really like doing vector illustrations on my laptop, is that it can be easy to accidentally put a node down right next to this node instead of actually clicking it. So that's why smart guides are nice to have turned on, because once I see that little anchor text pop up, which might not look super clear on the screen share, but that helps me know that I've selected that anchor, so I can close the handle down. Okay, so now I've got that closed shape there. So the reason I do this is because I'm not relying on the more limited stroke controls to make my lines. I've got really just closed shapes, which I can then afterwards go back and edit and move around to kind of create thickness and thinness within my shapes. So it's just a little bit more work for sure, but it just gives me a lot more control over the finished shape and the finished graphic. So you can kind of see how it's starting to come together in preview mode here. Now if I were to switch the fill this way, well, I'm gonna fill this one with white, and I'm gonna put nothing on the stroke, because ultimately I'm not going to use any strokes in this. But this is just sort of preview the basics of how it's going to come together.
So when you're making different paths, do we go on to a different layer?
No.
So that we don't connect to the one before we did?
No, all your paths can just be on the one layer. I mean, realistically, a path is almost like a layer. And there's not really any limit to how far down this branch can go. You can then, if I were to take this and group it, okay, so Control G to make a group. That then took those two things and made it into a group. But now I can expand that, and now you can see that my two paths are still separated. The difference for a group is when I just click it, you know, they stick together. But I can then double click into that in what's called isolation mode and keep working. And isolation mode can actually be kind of handy because it dims your tracing reference sometimes. So if your color isn't standing out so well, it can be kind of a good way to go. But yeah, you don't need a new layer for every shape. Layers are meant to, you want to kind of have a reasonable layer structure. You don't want to have too many layers, but you're going to by default get everything is kind of its own object in Adobe Illustrator. You get this little menu here up at the top. If you do enter isolation mode accidentally by double clicking on a group, you can just always click this arrow and it takes you back up to the main structure. But you can always see in your layers palette where you are in terms of the navigation. So I'm just going to ungroup that just to keep it simple. So just to kind of reiterate and recover it, I've got my references locked so I don't accidentally select it, and I'm just drawing now in my dogs layer over top. So I'm going to swap my fill back to outline so I can see my drawing again. Do the same thing here. I mean, I could leave that white, it's fine. But I kind of want to keep working with black. It's a little, it really doesn't matter what the color is because I'm just making the shapes right now. So now I'm going to just move on to the inside. So I'm just going to now I'm just doing this little, kind of the main face shape for now. So just getting comfortable with when you want to close down a handle and when you want to leave it open. Like here, I kind of wanted to maintain that curve, so I didn't close it, but most of the time I want to get this little pointy bit, so that's why I'm closing the handle down. Actually, maybe I don't. And I've worked with some people who are, they've got their own kind of style and approach to doing this sort of thing. They never close down their curves. They always leave them open, and they try and make it always work with that. I find that very challenging, but I've seen people do that just because they don't like these little kind of corners that you sometimes get. I just find that to be a way more finicky process than just closing my handle and continuing. So I think that that's a pretty fundamental thing when you're trying to make your custom shapes and adapt a drawing to get comfortable with. I mean, when you see any sort of version of like a Disney character, let's say, that you see that's kind of been turned into a graphic for like packaging or whatever, you can almost guarantee it was done using this basic process in Adobe Illustrator. There's whole teams of people that's pretty much all they do is they take drawings from the lead animators or whatever the drawings and convert them to vector graphics for millions of print applications. It's just so commonly done. So it's a good technique to kind of get comfortable with. And it's certainly more fun to work on your own artwork than somebody else's Mickey Mouse. But if you guys want to draw Mickey Mouse or whatever, go for it. Actually, I kind of think I want this line to be thicker. I mean, you don't really have to get it perfect here because you can. The whole point of doing this in Illustrator too is that you can go back and edit these shapes until your heart's content. Okay, so now whoops, I don't want to check the spelling, wrong key. I meant to do Control S to save my work. I'm gonna still call this the draft, yes. So the reason I'm saving is, I mean, Adobe Illustrator's gotten a lot more solid over the past few updates for sure, but if you've been working with Illustrator a lot, you will learn that it has a bad habit of crashing. I don't really know why, but I just really get in the habit of pretty much every time I complete a sort of shape, I save my work. That's just kind of becomes a reflex. It's not so important anymore because really Illustrator's gotten a lot more solid over the years, but I don't know. I hate losing work, so save now, save often. By the way, while I'm working along here, if anybody wants to kind of show me the work in progress, or just switch over to screen share because you're running into sort of an issue or having a challenge with something, you know, you can go ahead and let me know. In terms of techniques for assignment 1 for the map, yeah, I mean, basically all assignment 1 is doing is teaching you about layers and shapes and organizing your layers and shapes and tracing stuff. I just don't think that tracing a shape of British Columbia is very much fun. And assignment 2 is do your own drawing and bring it in, but you're using the exact same technique. So I would say that this is a more time-consuming type of thing to do, but also a lot more rewarding at the end of the day if you're trying to just get comfortable with Illustrator in general. So I'm just kind of saying we'll just combine project 1 and 2 because the same skills are absolutely present. These things apply to everything you do in Adobe Illustrator. And actually, a lot of times you're not even, this is probably more complex because a lot of times you don't need to do kind of free-form graphics like this. If you're doing a logo, you're more working with type and sort of your primary shapes a lot of the time. Really depends on the style of the logo, right? So I find this to be a really great project to just dive in and get comfortable with, but I'm going to give you guys lots and lots of time to work on it. Yeah, if you want to do the map of BC, then you would need to manually outline it, which, you know, if you want to, sure. Realistically, that's what stock graphics are for. I would never sit down and draw a map of a province. I would just go to stock.adobe.com, grab a map of Canada, cut the shape out. You know, it's, we could, yeah, exactly. I mean, if you guys want to do assignment 1, everything applies. You're not going to learn anything real special there, and the end result's going to be something that, well, I don't know how excited you're going to be about having a map graphic of BC, but if you take your own drawing and really put the time in, I think you'll have more fun with this. And you could do a couple of these. I mean, we're going to have like fully 4 classes, so like that's 16 hours to work on these. That's a lot of time to work on this type of a graphic. But if you're new to it, it's not going to go super fast right away. So I want to make sure that you got a lot of time to produce something that you really enjoy. But I'm just going to kind of use this one project to get your skills going on either one. Yes. Oh, thank you. I didn't know that we had the stuff for these.
Question for you.
Yeah.
So if you have a reference that is purely symmetrical, is there?
Okay, so if I wanted to make something, say I just wanted to do like something perfectly symmetrical, I'm just going to drag myself a reference guide there just so I kind of get a nice line right down the middle. Say it's just like some kind of unique object like that. Okay. So say I wanted to make my graphic completely symmetrical, so I can hold down the Alt key. Well, actually I can right click, transform, and then reflect. So again, right click, select the shape, right click, transform, reflect. It's going to preview it, right? But if you hit, you can reflect horizontally on an angle or vertical, but typically you're flipping vertically. And then you can hit OK, it'll either just flip that, or you can hit copy, and that'll actually make a mirrored copy of your shape. And then you can just snap it right into place. Is that what you're trying to do?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so that's all you can do there. You can kind of get real fancy with stuff like that too. Like you can, I don't think we really need to dive into using symbols and stuff like that, but you can also make this into a dynamic symbol. So there's all kinds of very cool effects you can get with dynamic symbols and mirroring and flipping and all the rest of it. But at the most basic level, that's how you draw something like a weird pair of kangaroo legs, which I guess I accidentally drew there. When I dragged a guide, actually, that's, you know, I shouldn't assume that you know that. So if you have your rulers turned on, you can drag reference guides by clicking on the ruler and then dragging. That just brings a guide onto the page. That can be handy for symmetrical graphics or stuff if you're trying to plan their stuff out there. Guides are locked by default. So if you want to get rid of a guide that you accidentally dragged, you go View, Guides, Unlock Guides. Okay. The shortcut on Windows is Alt-Control semicolon. I don't know if you're ever going to remember that, but once that's done, you've unlocked them, then you can select your guide. You can see that a guide shows up like an object on a layer. You can just delete it. Turn everything towards being filled versus stroked, just so we can kind of see all the shapes here. So I can hold down Shift to just select all the stuff that I've currently got outlined. It's just these shapes. Pop those to fills. Fill that to black. I guess I want these shapes to be black, don't I? So Control Y to outline mode so I can see the shapes. Control Y to go back, fill them with black. Okay, so that's kind of happy with that. I'm sort of saying, yeah, that looks pretty good for the basics that I'm going for. And now I kind of want to go through and start coloring it. So you know, I've got a white shape here and this shape and this shape and all the rest of it. And this is okay. I could just group this and call that done. But what I really want is I want this whole shape, the black shape, to be one continuous grouped shape. And the reason I want to do that is so that I can mess with the color and fill it without having to select all the single shapes. So you can create what is called a compound path. So compound pathing in Illustrator is really yes, I do the daily assessments, depending on the class, basically, depending on what sort of the things that we've covered. Like today, part of my daily assessment is I would just want to see at least your reference sketch uploaded to the Google Drive folder. That'll let me know that you're following along, you're paying attention, and you're actually kind of doing something. And because I know some of you maybe don't have Adobe Illustrator worked out yet, I think that would be about the only sort of fair thing to do, the daily assessment. So, I mean, I do that for sure. But if there's a day where it's just like a working studio day where somebody kind of says, look, okay, we spent our time doing the lecture and I kind of just want to work on my project, that's fine. We just case by case basis, we just kind of deal with it. The whole point of the daily assessment is to make sure that nobody is kind of being left behind, that nobody's missing out on a couple of core concepts, or doesn't know what's going on, or can't get the computer working, or can't access Google Drive, or can't access Adobe Illustrator. Just really need to have that feedback so that I can help every one of you out individually. I mean, one of the challenges with so many people in this class is that each of you probably isn't going to get quite as much one-on-one time if you need it as previous classes I've had. Just to put it in context, the last Adobe Illustrator class I had 7 people in it. So I was able to give every student who wanted it pretty much complete hands-on work with each of their projects. And some students really took advantage of that, others didn't. They just did their own thing, but they managed to keep up with the class. But like there was one student she was the only one who even showed up one day. Everybody just decided to skip class that day. So she pretty much got a 4-hour hands-on custom. I just worked on her project with her. And that was great, I think, because she managed to learn a lot. Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty big change. This is a lot of people to try and cover everybody, but I'm happy to do it. I'm not too worried about it. I think it's just going to take me a lot more time to grade everybody's work. I mean, in the past, I get really detailed with my feedback, but I might not be able to get as detailed in the feedback. But on the other hand, you know, this is more basic, so there's not going to be as much stuff to cover. And like I say, this isn't a creative class. This is a technical class, a craft class. So I'm really just evaluating your work based on how well you remembered to do the kind of fundamental stuff, organizing your spot colors, keeping your layers straight. You know, that's pretty much it. The creative work that you do is totally up to you. And like I say, I'm more than happy to give you guys feedback on that. So hopefully that answers that question. So back to compound paths. I'm going to bring up a tool window here called the Pathfinder. Just going to get these palettes off the screen because I'm going to leave my layers in place. But I'm going to bring up Pathfinder. So I have a palette group that I make, which has my gradients, which I'll probably mess around with a little bit today. An appearance panel. This is a super important panel, the appearance panel. And then the Pathfinder. These are all separate windows that you can all find under Windows. So Window, Pathfinder. You can actually make your own groups of palettes. When I talk about a palette group, you just drag it until you see that blue and then let go. And then that just kind of groups that palette. So if you're working with more than one monitor, which is the ideal setup really for Adobe Illustrator, because it does suffer from palette clutter. You know, I've got 3 monitors for my production setup, but I realize that's not always the case. But if you are working with group palettes, you can collapse them to give yourself a little more room with this little arrow here. So if you're just on one monitor on your laptop or working mobile, that's one of the ways you can kind of help deal with your palette clutter in Adobe Illustrator. But I find that these palette groups, if you're in a multi-monitor setup, are really handy. But not always possible for sure. So the Pathfinder, you've got shape modes. Okay, so I'm just going to go through them quickly. So you've got basic concept here: unite, minus front, intersect, and exclude. And then down below you've got divide, trim, merge, crop, outline, minus back. So minus back is sort of a reverse of minus front. Why it's separated out as a Pathfinder and not a shape mode, I couldn't tell you. They're functionally exactly the same. 9 times out of 10, you're just using these shape modes. There are certain cases where you want to use division, but most of the time it's unite minus front. That's pretty much it. And occasionally intersect. There's some times where you want to do that. But most of the time, really what I'm doing is I actually use minus front or unite. So I'm just going to kind of go through how I use that and why I use it. So I'm going to now make a copy. I'm done drawing, so I'm going to go through and turn my layer off that has the reference drawing on it. Where did I put my layers palette? Right in front of my face. Okay, unlock it, go down. I'm just going to hide this one. You'll note that you can individually lock stuff under a layer. You don't have to lock the entire layer. If you just want to lock one thing, you can treat objects just like you do layers. Okay, but I'm going to make a duplicate of this little dog face here. Hold down the Alt key, click. There you go. So I'm going to keep my original work up there. And this is going to be my, break this down to outlines. So this main shape, if I were to bring it to the front, okay, so you've got this arrange function. If you right click on any shape, you can arrange the order that it shows up in the layer. So when I select this, finally go down, here's the shape here. It's just kind of somewhere in the order of the objects that I made. So it's not necessarily easy to spot in there, but that's what that shape is. If I go right click, arrange, bring to front, it pops it up to the top of the layer stack right there. So what you can see is that's my outline shape. So let's say I want to put this graphic over a background of some sort. I'm going to just make myself a couple of colored spot colors now so we can start introducing some color. So I think I'm going to want a browny color. Oh, that's not the right window. I want swatches. So I'm going to say new swatch, spot color. I'm going to call it brown. I'm just kind of messing around with the sliders here until I feel that this looks the appropriate tint of brown that I want, which is right about there, sort of a fawn color. Okay, so you'll note that I didn't check add to my library. Add to library is Adobe Creative Cloud, so you can actually save assets and palettes to Adobe Creative Cloud. I would highly recommend do not rely on Adobe Cloud for your file storage. It is really, really, really unreliable. I have lost a lot of work by accident somehow because I saved it to cloud. I really don't count on it. So that's just my experience. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing with cloud saves, but I don't like saving stuff to libraries. I only count on my local drive. So for anybody who's kind of new to Adobe Creative Cloud and is maybe like, oh sweet, I can save my libraries and access them anywhere. Yeah, in theory, but I've had it fail on me more times than I've had it work. So the best way is still the basic way. Keep an external drive that you can move around to different computers for your files, and just rely on that. So that's what that whole save to my library thing is. Okay, so I've given myself a brown color. So let's say I want to put this dog over top of brown, a brown circle. Okay, so just draw my shape, arrange, send it back. So that's kind of cool. That's not bad. But what if I wanted to see my colors through this? I just wanted this to be an outline and whatever color I want to kind of show through on parts. So that's what I'm sort of doing is I want to make this black. It's almost like a cookie cutter. I want to create a custom cookie cutter out of these intersecting shapes. Okay. So I'm going to send this to the back, and I'm just going to start using the minus front tool. You know, it's just kind of imagine it's like punching colors out of a cookie cutter. So I'm going to put this circle in behind here. I'm going to send that to the back. Okay, so if I select my main black shape and then this shape, the little chin here, shift. So I've got both. Okay, I'm just going to minus front. Okay, so that what that did is that created a compound path of those two shapes. So a compound path is kind of like a group, but it's like, you know, it's shapes within a shape. So now you can see in my layer palette that's called a compound path. You can, if say you don't like that, you can go Object, Compound Path, Release. It goes back to how it was, but it's going to interpret, you got two shapes again. Okay, so Pathfinder is really just a different way of making compound paths. So compound paths are also different than groups. So if I were to just hold down Shift for these three shapes and do that and then say minus back, that works too. That's just creating a more complex compound path. So that gives me now this shape that's one unified complete shape. It's kind of like grouping but a little different because now whatever I put in behind I can see through there, which is you know, kind of what I want. And I like, with these types of graphics, I like to take the whole, everything that's black and make it into one complete contiguous compound shape. So these eyes are the same thing. Okay, so now I've got all of these black shapes. Which I can group, and that basically is going to function exactly the same thing as if I were just to make it into a complex compound path. So I can also go Object, Compound Path, Make, Oops, I didn't want those white dots to be part of it. Gotta ungroup these first. So every time I get that contextual menu, what I'm doing is I'm just right clicking, okay? Okay, so I've got everything selected that I want. I could do select same color, but that would then select up here, so I won't do that. Object, compound path, make. So now this little guy is a completely unified graphic that I can then apply colors to, just like it was a single color. So it just makes it easier to go through and change my colors around without having to reselect everything over and over again. And then if I want something to be part of that group but not behave that way, then I can group those things and keep them kind of independent. So, I mean, it's not 100% necessary, but just for flexibility of different ways that I might apply this, I like to do that with my shapes. You know, a lot of times then it's like, well, I still want to fill this with brown, and I still maybe want the eyes to be a different color or whatever. That's just going to be adding more shapes to my object. So once I'm kind of happy with that drawing, you know, it really depends what I'm going to do next. You know, my next step here is going to be to draw the other one, and then I'm going to combine these two together into sort of a logo type of thing. That's what my sort of plan is for it longer term. But I'm not going to go into that today. I'll be doing that next class with my drawing. To this point, I've kind of taken it kind of as far as it needs to go today for this kind of step in the project. And I'm just going to kind of go through and just get a little bit into why you would make spot colors versus process colors and just kind of quickly demonstrate that. And you guys are going to use this pretty much in every project going forward. So, you know, let's say I had another color here that's just brown copy that wasn't a spot color. It's not brown, it's peach. When we're looking at appearance, you know, the default appearance, if you never opened this palette, you would sort of get the sense from Illustrator that all you can really do with a shape is fill it with a color or a gradient or a pattern and put a stroke around it. But you can actually put as many fills as you like in one shape using the appearance palette. You can layer fills over top of each other. You can apply multiple strokes of different colors and different styles to a shape. So that can be kind of cool. It can give you more flexibility in what you're doing. The main use for it, I find, is when applying gradients to something. Okay, so a gradient, that's why I have it attached to my palette. I'm just going to get the other stuff out of the way that I'm not using right now, which is just layers. So this is one thing that I think Illustrator isn't really super intuitive about, is like when you make a gradient from one spot color to another, it doesn't necessarily make it obvious how you save a gradient. So I want to fill this, I want it to go from sort of this greeny color out to this brown color. So the first thing I'm going to do is go and make this into a spot color. Simple as that. So now these swatches are available for me to build gradients out of. So I can just drag from one palette to the other to put that spot color in my gradient. I'm going to click and drag to get rid of these defaults that I don't want in there. And Adobe Illustrator is going to do a pretty nice job of blending these two colors. And I think that actually doesn't look too bad. So I want it to be radial. Kind of go green from the inside out. Okay. Now, let's say I ever wanted to come back and do that again. You know, I want to be able to, I don't want to have to rebuild that fill. So the way you can save your gradients is you click this little arrow and then click this add to swatches icon, which is, in my opinion, not very intuitive, and a lot of people forget or get frustrated because they have to keep rebuilding their gradients. So that's just a quick little tip. You can save your gradients that way, so you don't have to keep rebuilding them. And I'm going to go back and this. So now I want to fill that gradient with that color. So that's just kind of the only reason I like to break my shapes down into kind of outlines like that, because then it just gives me more freedom to kind of work with however it is in there. But there's nothing wrong with I could get the exact same thing by not doing that. So it's just a personal preference really, but it's just a good way to illustrate the use of compound paths and the Pathfinder to make kind of complex compound paths. So I think that's probably enough to chew on today. I'm going to save my work and just kind of fiddle around a little bit with this more, but I don't think I need to record anything more for future reference. We've covered everything we need today. Like I say, we've got another hour and 10 minutes here. Feel free to just keep working on your project. If you want to show me something, see how you're doing, share your work with the class, go right ahead. Just make the most of the studio time, and I'll sort of say that the next hour is just open for anybody who wants to screen share or upload your Illustrator file, or if you're running into anything that you're just kind of wrestling with because you're kind of new to it or whatever. It's just kind of open question time to work on your graphics. But from here, I'll just kind of mute my mic so you don't have to listen to my yammering on. Put on some music and whatever.
So you'd like us to just upload our original drawing for the assessment, the daily assessment? Put that in Google Drive?
Yep, upload it to your Google Drive folder just so I can sort of see that you're working along, and just let me know where you're at. But I'd say as sort of a milestone for today for this project, just have your Illustrator reference kind of ready to go. And if you wanted to dive in and start working on Illustrator, you can do that as well. I should be able to, as long as you put everything in Google Drive. I'll switch over there now. So,
and where are we going to be putting this? Is one or two?
Put it in two. Original artwork traced from scan.
Okay. So you want the original picture and the drawing too? The assessment?
Whatever you're referring,
drawing.
whatever you're planning on turning into your vector graphic. I just kind of want to get a sense of what your kind of idea is for your graphic.
Okay, well, like one of my drawings is one of my finals from last semester, so.
Yeah. I mean, if you've got a drawing that you want to work with and kind of keep going, that's cool. To answer your question, Rainier, you're seeing what I'm seeing, so I can see Andrew's file because he has uploaded it, or at least his folder. So you need to go to the original, just put your folder in here with your name and then put your files under there. So right now, no, I'm not, because it doesn't look like you've put it in the folder.
Sorry, excuse me. How do you get to the Google Drive?
Okay, so open up a browser, any browser you have available, Chrome,
Okay.
Firefox, whatever. Go to drive.google.com and then log in with your Gmail account.
Oh, and then we just submit it there?
Well, you're going to need to then make sure you're going to the shared project folder that I shared with you, so you need to go to My Drive.
Oh, was this at the beginning of the class? Or-
Yes.
Oh, I missed that. Sorry, I
Yep.
was late.
Yep.
For like today. Sorry, could you share it again?
Do I have your Gmail address? That would be the first thing I need to know.
Oh, do I just put it in the chat?
That would be a good plan. Yep.
Do you have any kind of file nomenclature that you want? Naming preference?
No, just don't name it with screwy special characters and stuff.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Okay, so Fabienne, the folder's been shared with you now, so when you go to Google Drive, it should show up at the top of your shared with me view. But if it isn't, you can always search for this first few bits there and it should show up for you.
I got it. Thank
Perfect.
you.
Yeah, no worries. Cool. All right, so I see everybody's going along, creating their files. That's great. Yep, yeah, adjusting the contrast so you can kind of see your lines there. That's good. Yeah, reversing it, looking at it's negative against black for sure. That's cool. Yeah, I think that can work. Nice. Kind of a fly elephant guy.
It's my Ella fly.
Fly elephant. Yeah, nice. Yeah, so something like that, if you wanted to get that kind of cross-hatching effect, I mean, that can be a little on the time-consuming side, but it can look really, really nice if it's done well. And in next week's class, I can show you how to use the blending tool to kind of speed up doing this kind of cross-hatching effect. Because I think it can look really nice if it's done right in Illustrator, so that's cool. I like it.
Hi, sorry, I had a question
Yep.
because my fill's not working. I'm not sure what. I guess I'm clicking on something wrong. Do you mind checking it? Can I share it?
Yeah, absolutely.
How do I share it from my phone?
Down on the right-hand side, I think if you click Present Now, or I might need to make you, yeah, there we go.
It's here.
Okay.
Can you see it?
I can see it. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm clicking on all of this. What is wrong? Why am I- And it's just right here, right? And it's not filling for some reason.
Yeah, so that's because you've got what looked to me like a group of unclosed shapes. So if you with your direct selection tool, right click on your graphic.
On here?
Yeah, and then just, okay, so they're not grouped. Okay, I thought maybe they're grouped. So just click outside of that just to deselect everything. Okay, and then just, let's click on his paw.
Okay.
Okay, so you can see that it has a fill applied to it.
Where?
Does it matter the order of the layers? Because I think her reference image is above her pen tool.
Yeah. So you can, oh yeah, well, exactly. So yeah, good catch. I'm like, yeah, I see a fill applied, but where is it? Yeah, you've got your sketch over top of your drawing. So go and click on pen tool. And, yeah, and drag it up.
Oh.
Okay.
That's
But
why.
I mean, the first thing though that I noticed is that because you've just got unclosed shapes, you're going to have trouble controlling the fill there. So you're going to want to make sure that you're closing in your shape so that you can control the fill area, basically.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Yes. Thank you.
But you'll work on that. But yeah, so yeah, just number one, kind of keeping your layers organized. But you got it. Yeah, exactly. So you just want to close your shapes like that.
And then I can just like do it from here. Oh, it's not working.
Yeah,
I
you
guess.
can change your things. While I have your screen share, go to Window and bring up your Swatch library. Swatches. Okay. Change your view to List View. You can click on the little hamburger menu. There you go. Yep. So first thing I always do is select all unused. So just select all unused, and then just go
And
down to the little
delete?
trash, delete swatches. Yep. Yep. That just makes your palette easier to work with, so you got your colors. And then I would recommend, if you're kind of making a brown, make it into a spot color, so you can double click on your brown color there. Double click on the actual, yeah, there you go. Now where it says process color, go to spot color. Yeah, there you go. That's just going to be easier to work with when you're applying tints or want to change it globally, because now every shape that you apply that spot color to, it's going to kind of be linked to the shapes. So if you change your mind on that particular shade or tint of brown, down the road, every shape that you draw will automatically reflect that change.
Okay, yes, thank you.
Yeah, so it's looking looks like a good illustration to take a kick at. So that's good. So Fabienne, I see that you've got your folder in the root. Make yourself an actual folder for your project and put your file into the folder.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, that's no problem. I'll go back to my presentation mode. Morning coffee bear on grid paper. Sometimes grid paper, when you're working like this, can be a little frustrating just because you kind of got more lines to contend with, but that's okay. You can totally work with that.
Yeah, I usually use it for if I'm drawing fonts or like straight lines, that sort
Yeah.
of thing. But
Yep.
I just happened to I was doing a different image before that
Yeah.
had a lot of straight lines, then
Yeah.
changed it.
Yeah. No,
And
there's
now
lots
I'm
of good
kind of
reasons to
wishing
do it.
yeah, and now I'm wishing I did the straight line one because I'm having a lot of trouble using the pen tool.
Okay.
Just because it's got so many small, so I'm having to do like the paintbrush tool and stuff. I'm gonna go back later and do a different image, but
Yeah, I mean, the other thing too is, I mean, you don't have to follow your drawing exactly. You could smooth out all those shapes and still capture the basic gesture of it. You know, that's kind of one of the beauty of the process, is you don't have to follow your line exactly by any means. So,
yeah.
yeah, but I mean, I think that the core character there is good, and you can totally work with it. So doing sort of an interior architectural graphic, it's also kind of that could be kind of cool. You know, this, just looking at Keegan's drawing here, you know, this is a little different, but the same idea. I mean, you could just get away with doing more kind of straight lines, less curves here, because almost everything here is made up of straight lines. But you could definitely use the same sort of techniques to get that kind of strong perspective. I mean, their Illustrator is actually really good for that because it's got pre-built perspective grids that you can draw over top of. But this will work for sure. And I see you've got your AI file there. Now it's a 125 megabyte AI file, which is pretty big. Kind of wondering, because I mean, if this is,
I'll reduce it.
yeah, I mean, it's okay. I mean, that's fine. I'm just wondering what's making it so big.
I think I took a picture of my picture hand in with my phone, and it's an HEIC, a hick or whatever.
Yeah. So
And I had to reduce it a lot in order for me to hand it in.
Yeah, for sure. So it's just a super high res linked image. I mean, that's fine. I mean, this is just for reference. It's perfectly good. Yeah. I mean, I don't mind downloading 125 megs. That's fine. But if there's anything you want me to look at, like, is just AI work in progress that you wanted me to take a look at, or on your Adobe Illustrator file?
Oh, no.
No? Okay.
No. I just, it was putting it there. I meant to put the picture there, and then, yeah.
I see a few of us are inspired to draw our dogs. I like that one. That's good.
Is there a way to change the size of the eraser tool?
The eraser tool.
Or is it the eraser tool like just to delete? Like I
Yeah,
see if you
the
click on
eraser
it
tool is
deletes
kind of a
all-
little wonky in Adobe Illustrator. It kind of works. Like I really never use it, but you know, it's like a slice. It slices through your graphics. You know,
Yeah, I see that.
like if you go and it's kind of like a freehand divider tool. I don't know. Mostly freehand tools. I don't feel that Illustrator is well suited to freehanding stuff. You know. But you can. But I mean, there's another tool like the slice tool, slice selection. It does kind of the same thing. A slice just makes square breaks. It's totally out of date. Nobody builds web graphics that way anymore. But it does kind of the same thing just with squares. Can you make the eraser tool bigger? I don't know. Like I say, I find very little use for the eraser tool.
Yeah, I just
Like,
I
what
was
are you
too
trying to
far
do
ahead
with
to
it, I
go.
guess?
Oh, I was just trying to erase like a specific line, and I've gone too many steps ahead. Like I'm just going back.
Okay. If you want to share your screen or share your Illustrator file, I could, and show me what you're trying to do, I could download your Illustrator file and kind of show you how I would do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to zip these. We'll get into file packaging later. I'm not going to worry about that right now. Just sometimes Google Drive can be real slow to create the zip. So sometimes what I'll say is, you know, package and zip your file before uploading. It just goes faster, but it's not going to be too bad this time. All good. Okay, so what line are you looking to get rid of?
So the eye, like where it's just the two little lines on the left eye,
Mm-hmm.
and to me, the quickest way would be erase them, right? But as soon as I erase them, then it
Yeah.
erases
No.
part of the nose.
No. Yeah. So yeah. I mean, this is getting into what I was saying about how the sort of intuitive when you're first getting into Illustrator, the sense is to use lines versus the shapes. But so all I've done is I've gone to outline mode, and then I'm just using the direct selection, and then you just delete.
I'm sorry, how did you get into the outline mode?
So Control Y,
Oh, okay.
or in the menu it's View, Outline.
Okay.
So that just helps you see. I mean, you're still just selecting your shapes here, right? But now, I mean, and this is okay. But what you're going to have trouble doing is working with all of these sort of disparate lines to really control them. So you know, lines are kind of limited in Illustrator because you can't use fills or whatever. However, what you could do, you know, doing this once. This is an alternate technique to what I've done is, you know, if you're happy with this outline, you could go through, right? You could hold down Shift and select, and then go Object. And I'll switch to outline mode just to make it a little more clear. As I go Object, Path, Outline, Stroke. Okay. So now that's kind of made a bunch of funky shapes, but they're still kind of not unified. But then I can use the Pathfinder tool to unify all these together. Right here, shape mode. and effectively that's a shortcut to pretty much doing what I was doing using the regular pen tool. So that is totally a valid way to do it. Absolutely, you can absolutely do that, and that's going to do this. You're going to get the same kind of nice unified single shape going that way too. So that's absolutely perfectly good process to go through. But yeah, the eraser tool rarely has any real use, right? Like if here, let's say I wanted to, I really think the eraser tool is useless. I never use it. I can't see why you would use it. It's just all you do is you're like, okay, well, I want to like, right, you know, slice through my shape like that. But I mean, I could do this exact same thing by just drawing myself a shape. You know, same deal. So it's just another way of doing that, but a little more freeform. So yeah, just get comfortable with switching between preview mode and outline mode, and then just direct selection tool to delete things if you're not happy with the lines.
Right.
All good?
Awesome.
Perfect.
Thank you.
No worries. Okay, I'm going to make sure that Natasha's uploaded the file so I can take a look.
I haven't uploaded anything yet into the folder.
Okay, well, as long as I'll just reopen your Illustrator file.
Yeah.
Okay, so kind of easier to demonstrate looking in outline mode here. So, because you've got your stroke effects applied. So let's just take a look at your line here. So you're using the kind of variable profile, okay, with profile 2. So let's just say I'm happy with all this. I'm going to just go Control A, okay? So you've got all your lines and your shapes, and what you want to do is unify those. So your first step 1 is Object, up in the Object menu, and then Path, and then Outline Stroke, okay? So what it's doing is it's literally taking the profile of all of those strokes and converting them to shapes. So what that did is it sort of, well, it's saying question marks right now, but I'm just going to fill everything with your rich black and take off. So no strokes. I should be able to remove all strokes. Well, for now, it's not letting me, but once I unify everything, it should allow me to. Okay, so I've done my path. So I'm going to zoom in a little closer just to kind of see what I'm looking to clean up. So now we've got all these sort of independent shapes with kind of funny little, you know, interior loops and stuff, which we don't want, which, you know, object, like when you convert a path or a stroke to a path, that type of thing happens pretty regularly. So what we're going to do is we're going to select all again, and we're going to use the Pathfinder tool and the Unite tool within Pathfinder. So Unite's just going to, everything that intersects is just going to get deleted, and it just sort of makes a silhouette of your overlapping shapes. Okay, so when I click that, so now all of those little interior bibs and bobs that we don't want are all gone. Now occasionally you'll get some of these little kind of line joins here, which you may or may not have wanted, but if you did, that's cool. That's sort of a look, and that's fine. But that's all I got to do. Those two things. Now that has literally created a big compound path out of all those shapes that now I can go through and quite easily work with, like it's its own nice kind of color, right?
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
How? Okay, so I've got it all selected in that. However, I don't have the same box open that you have to select the pathfinders.
So window, Pathfinder.
Right. Oh, and then path.
What's that?
Yeah, perfect. Found it.
Yeah, so window, Pathfinder, and then yeah, you just select all of your shapes and then just use the Unite tool to unite them.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Is it called merge in this? Oh no, never mind, found it. Unite.
Merge is a little different. it's not a ton different. It just, trying to think what the heck the difference even is. I probably have to go through and try it out. But anyways, I mean, one of the cool things that you could do, like say we wanted to, just because I was talking a little bit about the appearance thing.
Mm-hmm.
Why is this? Oh, because I've got a group. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ungroup these. I'm just going to kind of demonstrate how you can use the appearance panel to kind of do some interesting things with shapes once you've got them built like this. Not that it's what you wanted, but so I'm just going to group these all together so that, actually no, I'm going to make that into a compound path actually. Because you'll notice when I grouped it, I only could deal with the opacity, but a compound path allows me to deal with the stroke and things. So let's say we wanted to like add like a rainbow effect outside of this shape, right? But I don't want to go redrawing the same thing over and over again or whatever. So I'm going to make myself a couple more spot colors. Let's just make like a nice vibrant red. Bright orange.